I have to be honest with you, I spent about a week trying to track down every interview, every quote, every random magazine profile Chuck Norris ever gave just to put this list together. And look, I'm not complaining. Somebody had to do it. But if you've ever tried to research Chuck Norris, you quickly realize the man has been talking about movies he loves for 50 years. And he has never once been wrong about a single one of them. These are 11 action movies Chuck Norris says you absolutely need to see. Hi, my name is Jeffrey, and this is Old School Movies, Enter the Dragon. 1973. Okay, so Chuck Norris has talked about this movie more than almost any other film in interviews, and honestly that makes complete sense when you understand the history. Norris and Bruce Lee weren't just two guys who happened to be in the same industry. These men were friends. They trained together. Yes, Lee actually helped Norris develop parts of his screen fighting style, and Norris has never been shy about crediting him for that. Enter the Dragon was Lee's Hollywood breakthrough, and it came out just weeks after his death, which gave the whole thing this unbearably sad weight that you still feel watching it today. Lee plays a martial artist recruited by British intelligence to infiltrate a criminal island tournament, and what happens over the next hour and 40 minutes is basically a masterclass in how action should be put on film. Norris called Lee the most remarkable martial artist he ever encountered in his life. Not one of the most remarkable, the most. And when you watch Enter the Dragon, you understand exactly what he meant. The speed is real, the intensity is real. There are no camera tricks covering up weak technique. It's just Bruce Lee being Bruce Lee, and there has never been anyone like him before or since. If you haven't seen this one, stop whatever you're doing after this video and go fix that immediately. The Dirty Dozen. 1967. Chuck Norris has cited this one in interviews going back decades, and it's not hard to see why. Norris spent years in the military before he ever threw a punch on camera, and The Dirty Dozen speaks directly to that part of his identity. This is a movie that understands soldiers not as symbols or propaganda pieces, but as complicated, difficult, sometimes deeply unpleasant human beings who still manage to get the job done. Lee Marvin leads a group of military convicts on a suicide mission behind enemy lines in Nazi Germany. And the genius of the whole setup is that these men are genuinely not good people. They're murderers. They're violent. They're exactly the wrong candidates for a mission like this, and yet, somehow, that's exactly why it works. Norris talked about how the film captures something true about the way men behave under extreme pressure. The camaraderie isn't soft. It's not a feel-good bromance. It's the kind of bond that forms when everybody around you is fully aware they're probably not coming home. Robert Aldrich directed this thing with total confidence, and the action sequences still hold up more than 50 years later. Telly Savalas alone is worth the price of admission. The man is genuinely terrifying in this. Bullitt, 1968. Now, here's where I'll be honest with you. When I first saw Chuck Norris mention Bullitt, I thought, okay, sure, everyone mentions Bullitt, the car chase, San Francisco, Steve McQueen looking cool. But the more Norris talked about it, the more you realize he wasn't just praising the chase sequence. He was praising McQueen's entire approach to the character. McQueen plays a San Francisco cop, protecting a witness who ends up dead, and then spending the rest of the movie quietly dismantling the corrupt system that got the man killed. And quiet is really the operative word here. McQueen barely raises his voice in this entire film. He doesn't grandstand, he doesn't make speeches, he just moves through scenes with this total physical certainty that makes you believe every single thing he does. Norris has talked about how McQueen influenced his own screen presence. The idea that you don't have to fill every moment with noise, that stillness can be more powerful than movement. And yeah, okay, the car chase through the streets of San Francisco is still one of the greatest sequences ever committed to film. The sound design alone, those engines. If you've only ever seen it on a laptop, you owe yourself a proper sound system rewatch. Trust me on that one. The Great Escape, 1963. Chuck Norris has described this as one of the most purely entertaining movies ever made, and he is not wrong. Based on the true story of Allied prisoners of war attempting a massive escape from a German camp, The Great Escape somehow manages to be thrilling and fun, and genuinely moving all at the same time, which is a combination most filmmakers spend their entire careers trying to figure out. Steve McQueen again. Look, the man shows up twice on this list, and that tells you everything you need to know about 1960s action cinema. But the whole ensemble here is extraordinary. James Garner, Richard Attenborough, James Coburn, Charles Bronson. Director John Sturges basically assembled the Mount Rushmore of cool and then pointed cameras at them for 2 hours and 50 minutes. What Norris has pointed to specifically is the film's commitment to showing the planning, the tunnels, the forgeries, the organization required to move 250 men through a German prison camp without getting caught. It treats its audience like adults and it never insults your intelligence. The ending hits like a punch and it earns every bit of that emotional weight because you've spent nearly 3 hours actually caring about these men. Patton, y'all, 1970. This one is deeply personal for Chuck Norris, and you can hear it every time he brings it up. Norris served in the United States Air Force. He was stationed in Korea. The military isn't an abstraction for him the way it might be for a director who just read some books. So, when he talks about Patton, he's talking about the film that captured something real about military leadership and the complicated cost of being genuinely exceptional at war. George C. Scott gives what a lot of people, including Norris, consider the single greatest performance in American cinema. And look, I know that's a bold claim, but watch that opening monologue again and try to argue with it. Scott refused the Academy Award for this role, which is either the most principled thing a Hollywood actor has ever done, or the most stubborn, depending on your mood that day. Probably both. Franklin Schaffner directs with this incredible sense of scale, and yet the film never loses sight of the man at the center of it. Patton is brilliant and maddening and visionary and completely impossible all at once, and the movie holds all of that in tension without ever simplifying him. Norris has said, this is how you make a film about a real person. You don't sand down the edges, you show them whole. The Wild Bunch, 1969. Okay, so I want to be upfront about something here. Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch is not an easy movie. It is violent in ways that still feel genuinely shocking, even by today's standards. And when it came out in 1969, it caused an absolute firestorm. Critics lost their minds. Audiences didn't know what to do with it, and Chuck Norris loved it. Norris has talked about The Wild Bunch in the context of Peckinpah's total commitment to his vision. This is a movie about outlaws who are already obsolete. The Old West is dying around them, and they know it, and they can't stop it. And the only thing left to do is go out on their own terms. William Holden leads a gang of aging bandits into one final job in Mexico that predictably goes sideways in the most spectacular way possible. The climactic battle sequence at the end of this film was the most violent scene ever put on screen at that point in cinema history. Peckinpah shot it with 6 cameras running simultaneously at different frame rates and edited it together into something that feels less like a gunfight and more like a natural disaster. Norris pointed to it as proof that you can use violence in cinema as a legitimate artistic statement rather than just as spectacle. There is a difference, and The Wild Bunch understands that difference better than almost anything else ever made. The fact that Braveheart later borrowed from Peckinpah's editing techniques here just confirms how influential this thing really was. Deliverance, 1972. I'll be honest, when Deliverance shows up on a Chuck Norris favorites list, your first reaction might be, wait, really? This isn't an action movie in the traditional sense. There are no armies, no secret missions, no martial arts. But Norris has been consistent about this one over the years, and his reasoning is actually pretty interesting. 4 Atlanta businessmen go on a canoe trip through rural Georgia before a river valley gets dammed and flooded forever. What happens to them out there strips away every layer of civilization and comfort and forces them into a pure survival situation. Jon Voight and Burt Reynolds are extraordinary here, and the film is genuinely terrifying in a way that has nothing to do with monsters or explosions. What Norris responds to is the authenticity of the physical danger and the psychological pressure. He's talked about how Deliverance captures what it actually feels like when your body and your mind are being pushed past their limits, and the only option left is to keep moving forward. That's a theme that runs through every Chuck Norris film he ever made, and seeing where he drew that inspiration from makes the whole thing click into place. Apocalypse Now, 1979. Francis Ford Coppola spent years making this movie, nearly lost his mind making this movie, and produced something that nobody has ever fully figured out how to categorize. It's a war film. It's a fever dream. It's a philosophical horror movie dressed up in military fatigues. Chuck Norris has called it one of the most powerful films about the psychological reality of war ever made, and coming from a man who actually served, that carries some real weight. Martin Sheen plays a special forces captain sent up a river into Cambodia to find and terminate a rogue colonel played by Marlon Brando who has gone completely insane and set himself up as a god among local tribespeople. The journey upriver gets progressively stranger and more unhinged, and by the time you reach Brando, you're not entirely sure what reality even is anymore. The production itself was almost as chaotic as the film. Coppola, shot in the Philippines, survived a typhoon that destroyed the sets, watched Sheen have a real-life heart attack, dealt with Brando showing up overweight and not having read the source material, and somehow, out of all that chaos, came a masterpiece. Norris has pointed specifically to the film's refusal to give you easy answers about any of it. There's no clean moral at the end. There's no lesson neatly packaged for you to carry home. There's just the darkness and what it does to people. First Blood, 1982. Now look, I have to address the elephant in the room here. Chuck Norris and Sylvester Stallone were essentially competing for the same action movie audience throughout the 1980s. They made similar films. They went after similar roles. There was a genuine rivalry there, which makes it all the more interesting that Norris has been gracious enough to publicly praise First Blood over the years, because this movie is a legitimate masterpiece, and it deserved the recognition. Stallone plays John Rambo, a Vietnam veteran who gets harassed by a small-town sheriff and responds in ways the sheriff really should have thought harder about before getting started. What separates First Blood from everything that came after it in the franchise is that it's actually a character study. Rambo isn't a fantasy. He's a broken man who was trained to do terrible things and then abandoned by the country that trained him. Ted Kotcheff directs with a real feel for the Pacific Northwest wilderness, and Stallone gives what is genuinely one of the best performances of his career here, especially in that breakdown scene near the end. Norris has talked about how the film captured the Vietnam veteran experience in a way that felt true rather than exploitative. The sequels went in a different direction, but First Blood on its own is something special. Uncommon Valor, Bullitt, 1983. This one doesn't get talked about nearly enough, and Chuck Norris has been championing it for years, which tells you something. Gene Hackman plays a retired colonel who puts together his own private team to go back into Laos and rescue soldiers still listed as prisoners of war a decade after Vietnam ended. The setup is straightforward, but the execution is something else entirely. What makes Uncommon Valor work is the same thing that made The Dirty Dozen work: the team. The assembly of damaged plus complicated men who each bring something essential to an impossible mission. Ted Kotcheff directed this one too, same director as First Blood, and he brings that same no-nonsense approach to the action sequences. Nothing is glamorized, nothing is easy. Every step of this mission feels like it costs something. Norris has talked about this film specifically in the context of the POWMIA issue, which was a cause he was publicly involved with throughout the 80s. This wasn't just a movie to him. It was a film that said out loud something a lot of people were feeling, but that Hollywood wasn't particularly interested in addressing. Hackman is magnificent here, quietly furious for basically the entire runtime, and absolutely compelling every single second of it. Buff the Outlaw, Josey, Wales, 1976. Chuck Norris has called The Outlaw Josey Wales one of the greatest westerns ever made, and I think if you sat down with most serious film people, they would have a very hard time arguing with that. Clint Eastwood directs himself as a Missouri farmer whose family is slaughtered by Union soldiers during the Civil War. He joins a Confederate guerrilla group, the war ends, everyone surrenders except Wales, and he spends the rest of the film being hunted across the frontier while somehow accumulating the most unlikely group of companions you've ever seen in a Western. What Norris has always pointed to is the film's heart underneath all the gunfighting. Wales is a man who has lost everything and sworn himself to violence, and the whole movie is essentially about whether he can find his way back to something worth living for rather than just dying for. Eastwood plays it with this incredible restraint. He doesn't ask for your sympathy. He just lets you watch and draws you in anyway. The supporting cast is extraordinary. Chief Dan George nearly steals the entire film and should have gotten a lot more recognition for it. The action sequences are brutal and efficient, and the landscapes are gorgeous. This is one of those movies that does everything right and somehow still feels underappreciated. Chuck Norris has spent his whole career making movies about men who refuse to quit, about warriors and outcasts, and people who get pushed too far and push back harder. Every single film on this list fed into that. You can see the fingerprints of all 11 of them across everything he ever put on screen, and that's not a bad legacy for any list to have.